Welcome everyone to our Oceania webinar, and today's topic is Parishes and Schools, One Community in Christ. Welcome to this webinar, whether you're from Christchurch through to Perth or Hobart up to Cairns. We all gather here today to share on the topic of close to our hearts and to share our wisdom. So it's terrific to be here with you. And what we want you to do right now is to put into the chat just where you're from. That'll be terrific if we can just hear where people are coming from today. My name is Richard McMahon. I'm from the Diocese of Parramatta here in New South Wales. I'm from the Pastoral Planning Office, and I'm joined here today. My co-host is Grace Raklowska. And Grace is here at the Institute for Mission, also in the Diocese of Parramatta. And Grace, you're going to offer us today just a bit of an acknowledgement of country and prayer in a moment. But Grace, this is obviously a topic that's close to your heart, parishes and schools. You're a sister of the Holy Family of Nazareth. And so I'm sure this is a great topic for you to explore today.
Absolutely. I have worked in the system of parishes and schools for a very, very long time. I could say a lifetime, which simply means that the question, why we're not there yet, why we're not connecting so well, it's an ongoing challenge. So I look forward to hear what people have to say.
Yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to today. It's been a hot topic for a lot of people. And so just before we get into it, though, it's important that we do pause, and I'm going to invite you now, Grace, just to offer acknowledgement of country and lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Although we are meeting virtually, we continue to acknowledge the traditional custodians that have walked upon and cared for the lands upon which we are all individually located. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And as I was preparing the prayer for this starting point of our sharing, I found these beautiful words, which one of the schools actually in Netherlands put together. And if you could just kindly join me in this prayer, maybe trying to listen which word it's really connecting with your heart, which word it's really very important for you right now. That might be something what the Spirit will lead you through as we enter this prayerful and sharing space. If you would like, you can start by blessing yourself in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, our Maker, we praise you for the gift of community. Thank you for the communities in which we work and live. Thank you for the community that is your body, the church. Fill us with your Holy Spirit today, so that as one we reflect your light and love to each other and to the world. Amen. Enjoy the session, and over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Grace. Just a couple of things to remind ourselves about today, that our session is being recorded. We will be keeping you on mute while we're in this space, But in a moment, we're heading to our first of our share groups. And obviously there you'll unmute yourself. And then just a reminder when you come back to please put yourself back on to mute. Throughout the time together, we invite you and encourage you to please put your questions into the chat and also your insights or resources, links, anything that comes up that you think is useful to share. This is a place of shared wisdom, and so we value this online community. We're now going to move to our first chat, and the questions for this chat are really just to introduce yourself. And we're going to be just considering the question, I suppose, of parishes and schools. What's an insight or a question that you bring to this theme today? So I'll just invite us now to open up the rooms. We've got about 5 minutes, so please click join the room as that comes up for you on your screen. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had a great chat. And again, reminder, if you can use your own chat function. So if you might have some more stimulus now to put a few questions, comments into the chat, we'd love to hear from you. Right now, though, we're going to introduce our two keynote speakers for today, and I'm really excited to be introducing them to you. Our first one is Colin MacLeod. Colin is the Director of the National Centre for Religious Studies, which is part of Te Kapenga, a Catholic Leadership Institute in New Zealand. And Colin, I hope you can correct my pronunciation if I had that wrong. He lives in Dunedin and taught at Kavanagh College there, serving in various capacities as Director of Religious Studies and an Assistant Principal. Also, Nichii Mardon is with us, who's the Director of Catholic Education in the Diocese of Port Pirie in South Australia. And prior to her appointment as the Director of Catholic Education in the Diocese of Port Pirie in 2018, Nichii exercised leadership in reception to Year 12 in Catholic schools for almost 30 years. So Colin, Nichii, you're most welcome. Wonderful that you're with us today. And Colin, I'm going to start with you. You've been researching the relationship between parishes and schools. So I'd just love to hear your observations of where things are at and how we've got to where we are.
Thanks very much, Richard. It's fantastic to be part of this conversation. I thought what I'd do is start with an observation I made a couple of years ago. And this is of who I like to describe as one of the major doctors of the church, pretty much unknown. Look, a couple of years ago, her mum said that I could share these photos. I took them in Mass. I'm one of those people that take photos during Mass if something leaps up. This beautiful young girl, Sophie, I call her, for Sophia Wisdom. At the sign of peace time at Mass at our place, she starts giving the sign of peace to pretty much everybody. She starts with her family and then she just starts working through the pews. And I'm talking working through all the pews. She goes on and on and on. And it doesn't matter who the person is. And she teaches us, I think, the example of what it is that we actually need to function, to draw this parish and community. She shows us how to be community. First of all, there's outreach. It doesn't matter who it is. If she comes in front of you, her hand comes out and you give her the sign of peace, she gives you the sign of peace, and there's eye contact. There's a sense of welcome, a sense of connection with her. Just look at the faces of these people in the bottom image, if you doubt that level of connection. And there's inclusiveness. It doesn't matter what the people might smell like, how old they are, how young they are, what qualifications they've got, how much experience they have in being church, how saintly they are. Sophie comes up, gives them the sign of peace. Now, there's a level of perseverance. We've got a fantastic musician. And during this one Lamb of God, I was thinking, gee, that was a bit rumpy. And sure enough, out comes Sophie from beside the piano where she'd stopped until he actually gave her the sign of peace in the middle of the playing of the Lamb of God. And then she stood under the guy who's playing the guitar with her hands sort of reached up. You can see with the arrows. This absolute invitation to connect. And I was almost wanting to scream out loud as the guitarist is playing the Lamb of God as well. Let go, you know. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. He lets go of the guitar, very quick shake of the hands, and then sort of on, and then she keeps moving on. Now look where we're actually at in the Mass in this second part. So sign of peace is still happening. There's Sophie still giving the sign of peace while people are actually receiving communion. And what you can't see is that half of the church has actually been up, half of the gathering has been up, received communion, Sophie's still going until such time as everybody stands up where she actually is. And at that stage, she gets a little bit scared and she scurries back to mum and dad. If we can do these things in our school, in our parish, and if we can do these things together, I believe we might have the opportunity of doing what a 3-year-old is doing already. And I thought it would be nice to actually start with something that's the solution right at hand. Because part of the reality for us, as we know, is that church is very different today than what it was in the past. And that level of authority, perhaps, that a priest once had, that level of commitment that parishioners once had, and there is, let's be real, there's a certain sector within the Catholic community that wishes to return to what they see as a golden age. That time, in fact, possibly, arguably, in the literature certainly, wasn't necessarily a golden age. We need to be moving on rather than returning to, but there's certainly things that we can learn from the past and draw into the future. Now, we only need to look at our schools and compare them sometimes with our own education or the education of our parents or grandparents to see just how different it is in terms of religious no longer being in the schools, in terms of a different type of engagement between students, and the way that community operates and comes together is different than it was when we were kids. And in the literature, some people go so far as to say that parish and school are completely separate organisations. This is irrespective of what teaches and holds in terms of within Catholic education within the parish context. But for some of you listening to this, that will be absolutely your reality, that parish and school are completely different. Others, there's a spectrum of connection. And I certainly want to acknowledge that some schools are doing this very, very well. Some parishes are doing this very, very well. But it is a rarity, certainly in the literature. And the sense of parallel play, that we can actually be doing very similar things next to each other, but actually not engaging with one another. So someone could look at the parish, look at the school, say, yeah, they're part of the same community. But in actual fact, just like two little kids, they play next to each other, but don't actually connect, even though there's that awareness. And in Aotearoa, part of the reality nationally, but in Aotearoa, the sharing of a name just isn't enough. And we need to do some research. I'm lucky enough to be involved in some research that I'm doing myself as part of study and just seeing what's going on between the parish and the secondary sector. I love this image. I bet you that principal on the left-hand side isn't wanting to the one on the right, and I think the same goes both ways.
So Colin, thanks so much for that introduction, I suppose, into this space. And I think you've really nailed it in terms of where we are at today. There is a sense of course, this parallel streams that are sometimes there. I was thinking of a local high school I know where they had an engagement with refugees in the area. The parish, which was actually literally across the road, had an engagement with refugees, but neither knew about it until it was brought to their attention. And so I think it was the refugee agency itself said, oh, do you know that you guys from the parish and the school are both engaging with us? So it's fascinating to see that sometimes happening. So I think, you know, you've named the sort of situation where we're at, but the common themes, I've been really interested in that you've been exploring some of the common themes in the literature that underpin a healthy relationship. So could you now just move on to share what you've sort of discovered in your research around these common themes?
Sure. Look, and Richard, I hope you and the others don't mind that I'm using PowerPoint slides for this. And I just find it helps to sort of make the points reasonably clear. We are very, very blessed at the moment in the person of Pope Francis that we're getting somebody who actually shows for us what it is to connect at a whole range of levels. And what we're doing today is we're focusing on that level, that relationship between parish and parish school. But of course, the ripples that come in and that go out are much more diverse than just what we're highlighting. In the literature, it's really interesting that the church itself hardly ever writes about parish and school together. It's really a little bit flippant. It's not stunningly academic. It's a word count of when parish and parish schools sort of are mentioned. And the reality is that in 1979 in Catechesi Tradendi, there was quite a commonality, and they were talked about in a similar sort of a context, as there was a sense, often in the context of family, but that parish and school share It's pretty much non-existent anywhere else. And possibly that's because of how Rome actually works. But diving more into the literature, it's worth being conscious that identity isn't just about how the parish community sees itself and about how the community sees itself, but about how the individuals within those communities perceive the organisation to which they belong. And sometimes there's crossover, sometimes there absolutely isn't, as you mentioned in your example, that people can be doing exactly the same things. It comes through again and again that leadership is absolutely critical. We all know, I'm sure, if we're old enough, we've come across a priest that has been an absolute blessing to a parish, and another priest at another time who has been an absolute curse to the parish, arguably. It's people that actually hold these clerical roles and their understandings of what it is. I encountered a guy once, a lovely man in himself, but who was utterly gutted that people weren't flocking out of the school into his parish, and he was angry, really, really angry that people weren't turning up on Sundays. So that's the message that he's shared with the community. So many people actually that were regular mass goers stopped coming. Similarly, those priests that are able to connect have such a huge potential to impact. But on the flip side, priests tend not to be trained to work in the school context. Sure, during their seminary training, they might visit schools, they might even teach some religious education, but they're not actually taught at the seminary level how to grow relationships between parish and school. It's something that they're usually expected to just find out. Certainly the case in New Zealand and in the American context. Principals, on the other hand, are often not taught how to actually engage at the parish level. And if they're part of a parish team, that often works better, but there's actually skills that need to be learned in this. They need to have some education, which links to formation, and this being formed is one aspect of this. The other aspect of this leadership is often it's these people that are leading the formation. And if they're not in a space where they're actually trying to tie these parish and school together, then the formation that they provide for the community as leaders for both communities just won't happen. But when it's shared, this does come through strongly in the literature. When that leadership is shared, all sorts of amazing things happen. Usually, as nearly always happens in the synergy of community, where it ends up is where neither actually expects it to go. In the United States, it's quite common when schools are failing, when there aren't the funding, when the funding is not there, the parish community comes together to save the school, to literally drag it out of financial ruin and establish it. And while they're saving the dollars or creating the dollars, they're also connecting at a very human, at a very spiritual level, and find themselves growing communities, sometimes in spite of themselves. And that third aspect that I think is critical in this area is that of mission and evangelization. The outreach, it's interesting how parish often is looking to reach out, and often is. At other times, the school is claiming, well, we are already reaching out. The kids that are already in our schools regularly attending RE, we're already engaged in mission activity because our people are here when they're not there in the pews. Arguably, some will say, because you're frightened them away or not being welcoming enough at parish. Not fairly, I think, certainly in all cases. And the articulation of how this actually happens, where is it said, how is it said, is absolutely critical. Because I believe that you could whip down the rows, and we would go back to where Sophie was in that mass, and we asked all of those people, what's the mission of your place? What is it that your parish is doing? It's rare that they would have a common understanding, even if it is written sometimes. It's still not commonly shared. And finally, this notion of participation, where it happens and where it doesn't happen. It can be as simple as organising your school working bee at the same time as the parish needs its lawns done and stuff. So you bring the parish and the school community together so that they actually are working in each other's spaces, mowing the lawns, pulling weeds, whatever, and start to talk to each other. And it is also, Richard, incredibly complicated. I'm not wanting to overly simplify.
You shared with us, and if you've been with me sort of just looking at all this thinking I wish I had a bit more time with Colin, well, you can, because obviously the video that Colin produced before today is available too, where he goes into some more detail about this space. Colin, I'm particularly, you know, when you were talking, I was thinking about this us and them that we sometimes hear about, that, you know, you sort of say, well, it's whose car park is it, you know, the school car park, the parish car park, and and we're trying to move beyond that. And I just love your that image of Sophie, and maybe she can be our next keynote speaker, because I think she's someone that is leading the way, as you say, in this shared space. But I want to move to you now, Nichii, because Colin's obviously looking at this at a research level. And I love the fact that then when we were looking around for a diocese, we're saying, well, who's actually sort of doing this in sort of the things that Colin's talking about? Where are they actually looking at a shared identity, shared leadership, shared mission, and coming together to even create statements around this? And so your Diocese of Port Pirie, Nichii, has obviously brought to life this pastoral statement on guiding principles for parish school relationships. So we were just really excited to hear this, and would love you to share what these guiding principles are, and how they might resonate with what Colin's been sharing with us.
Thanks, Richard, and thank you, Colin. Good morning, everybody. Welcoming you from sunny Port Augusta here in South Australia. It's a privilege to be speaking with you, but please, nothing I'm going to share is going to be new or rocket science, I'm quite sure. If you're thinking everything's perfect in this neck of the woods, it's not. But by golly, we're certainly trying. I'd also just begin by acknowledging others' experiences and contexts, and what I'm going to share comes out of an experience and a context that I'm familiar with, and I would trust that others will be able to adapt and contextualise for different places. And I also just wish to let you know that I'm certainly not the author or contributor in any significant way to the Being Church Together document that has been provided in the pre-reading, that I'd certainly encourage you to read. But that was developed by Catholic Education South Australia in partnership with the Adelaide Archdiocese Office for Renewing Parishes, and it's currently a working document. But I would certainly say that we have tried to embrace that, and it's been incorporated into our planning within the Diocese of Port Pirie. I think if the first slide there, I've just got 2 slides, and other than that, you're going to put up with me, I think. Thank you, Lisa. It's really important to get an understanding of who we're talking about, who we are, how we are, and for whom we are, in that connection between parish and schools. And this is a good diagram in many regards, but it's limiting also. The distinction here that's presented doesn't promote a dichotomy between the Catholic school and the parish worshipping community and the parish more broadly, but I hope that it is useful to develop a vision and a way of working together that enhances a relationship and the mutuality of the unique roles of the respective components. I'd also just point out, please, the diagram should not be read literally. It's not suggesting there's just a small overlap between the Catholic school and the parish and so on, but I'd hope that people can take that on. What it does, I hope, promote, and the document has definitions and deepens an understanding of who the parish is, who the parish worshipping community, the Catholic school, and how they're connected. But the key message here is that all within the parish are called to participate in the mission of the church. It is about the community that gathers in and around Sunday Eucharist, working in partnership with the parish school community, and there's lots of overlap. Schools and parishes have got a common mission, and if we support the role of each, it ensures that community, faith traditions, ritual, authority, common good, prayer are all upheld and enhanced. And particularly if we're talking about schools, we're talking about putting young people and children at the centre of it all. So on the next slide, the last slide, again, these are expanded with models of practice and examples of practice that resonate with each of these principles, but I just would start with an overview of them, and I'm going to highlight 1 or 2. The first one there, the principle that underpins, for there to be successful relationship and connection, ultimately for the people that we're all here to serve, there must be an acknowledgement of the sharing together of that mission of God. There must be a reflection, a complementarity, and an understanding between parish and the parish school communities about their shared identity of being a church and a parish together. That would be, and from that, where that happens, I think we would all know through our own experiences that there's a wholeness and there's a closer alignment with our mission when that's in play. I think this key principle is something, if we do nothing else but to be putting it on our agendas, I think we can't, you know, they're fluffy words, can be interpreted as, they are deeply impactful where it's a lived reality. So this shared mission is something that needs to be worked on, it needs to be talked about, it needs to be monitored, it needs to be reviewed, and we always need to be, particularly leaders in our communities, need to be seeking ways of enhancing this. Where this is strong, where there's strong acknowledgement of a shared mission of God, there's strong engagement and experiences of faith for everybody are enlivened, would be my experience. The second principle there, the mutual respect and support for those roles. I think a key point here is knowing who both the roles, the distinct roles and the complementary roles that exist need to honour the family. That's at the heart of this. If we get caught up in what's our role or who's who in the zoo or how we're conflicting or what we're doing, if the focus becomes on us and our organisations and not on the families, the children, the young people in our schools, I think when we put them at the centre of the conversation, the nature of the work and what flows from that is quite transformative. The other principles highlighted there about the shared engagement in being together. We need to, people from the parish worshipping community and school community, spending time together, developing relationships, strengthening the sense of being community together, and I might talk to some examples about that. But I was really taken by the picture of little Sophie Sophia. And I think, you know, I transfer a similar example in schools where we have grandparent celebrations, grandparent day, grandparent assembly, picnic, whatever. We have grandparents with children and young people in our schools and they're proudly brought along. We have grandparents perhaps in our parish worshipping community who don't have a connection or a child in the school currently, and who are grandparents within the same parish community. So I go back to who we are and for whom we are, we would have an open invitation for all. The fourth one there, it's not only about being together and praying together, but it's about acting together, finding those important things together to do for others and for the common good. There needs to be enhanced relationships comes where there's strong communication and effective communication. The sixth one, where there's cooperative, collaborative and shared leadership that supports shared mission and the unique roles. Again, in what Colin put up, the images that Colin shared with us, think of the expertise and the wisdom, the one body, many parts of who we've got in our leadership and in our broader communities, in our parish and in our school, and how those skills and gifts can be brought together to work for good outcomes. And the last one there, the sharing of resources, which, you know, it's a no-brainer, really. I would have thought that there is so much that each has to offer, and they're human resources and they're physical resources. So again, they are principles, but if we model our practice on some principles that are agreed upon and shared, I think only good things can come.
Thank you so much, Nichii. So much wisdom there and so much to unpack, and we have an opportunity to do that right now. So we're going to be moving on to our second of our share groups. When we get back, just as a bit of a teaser for you, Nichii will be sharing a bit of an example of how this is happening locally in Port Pirie. And we're also going to hear of another approach in Sydney Archdiocese. And obviously we want to hear your wisdom too, what's been working for you, as well as what questions. So we'll have a slide coming up now, which just focuses on this coming share group. And really, again, we're just going to be introducing ourselves. We're going to be sharing what we've heard, what we're finding helpful, and what questions we have. And of course, within that, feel free to share your wisdom. Really critical, choose a facilitator for this one. We've got about 15 minutes. And so if that person can act as a bit of a timekeeper, work out how many people are there, divide it by the number you first thought of, and then you'll work out how much time each person has to share. And we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back again, everyone. I'm hoping that was a fruitful conversation. Please now, if you can, start putting some more comments, observations, questions into the chat. If we have time, we'll try to respond to them here. Otherwise, they can form part of an FAQ that we can send out afterwards, including your own wisdom. Please don't forget that. Nichii, while we're starting to get a bit of feedback from people, I'll just invite you now to share briefly on a good news story in your diocese of this parish-school relations. Where have you seen it happening?
Thank you, Richard. I think there's a few ways that I've seen this evidenced and working well and strong. I guess, too, the good practice has to happen at all levels. In our diocese, we have, and we're a long way from where we need to be in so many regards, but we've just recently reviewed a diocesan strategic plan, which includes very strongly the plan, the target, the action that follows around collaborative partnerships of parishes and indeed all diocesan church ministries and agencies, but schools are certainly a part of that. It's about sharing the expertise and the resources. So some of those things that I spoke about that sit within the principles of the Being Church Together document are informing the strategic plan and hopefully will be evidenced. It's about at system level, and it's not hierarchical, I don't mean this at all, it's on every level we can see evidence of good practice here. At a system level, when I visit, our diocese is nearly 1 million square kilometres. It touches Uluru and it touches all of the borders of Australia other than Tasmania. It's a big place. But when visiting, we don't visit a school without visiting a parish priest and involvement and that's only one form of that, one part of one leader within that parish community, but it's about that active ongoing engagement and partnership and being seen to be. It's what we do and what we be seen to be, particularly by children and young people in our schools, because they are so impressionable. In terms of school context, I think there's so much from a regional, rural and remote context that could and should be mirrored everywhere. I think other places may need to work hard, but there is such a strength in our regional communities, and most dioceses, my understanding across Australia and New Zealand, have regional contexts within them. But that notion, the relationship between school and parish is necessarily strong. It's a small community. People in the broader town community resonate and identify the Catholic school. It often isn't even called St. Joseph's School or, whatever it might be. It's the Catholic school. That's quite powerful. So there's something we can learn about the proximity, the structures and processes that happen within the schools, where parish priests are very integrated, and in fact the parish pastoral council, there's strong integration between pastoral councils and school, where leadership teams get together and talk. And I guess the time doesn't permit lots of examples. I can share them later if that's what people are seeking. But I think that to finish off, I would say, by having something written such as the principles and practices that are endorsed in the framework proposed, it gives a talking point. I haven't bumped into a single school or parish that has ticked every one of even evidence of all of those principles in action. So for all of us, there's a place for us to go. So having those principles and a starting point and ensuring that's woven into the ongoing dialogue and discussion is a good starting point, I think.
Fabulous, yeah, and really good advice. Well, I'm now going to turn to Meredith Lemus, who was the former team leader of the Family Educator Project in Sydney Catholic schools. And she's going to just share something of her experience on the ground in this space. So welcome, Meredith, and we're keen to hear from you.
Thanks, Richard. I'm very passionate about that whole link between parish and school, and having 10 years leading the Family Educator Project, I was able to see a number of different strategies that different dioceses adopted to build that relationship between school and families. So for the work that I did in Sydney Catholic schools, we actually focused on family evangelisation, to use that as a strategy of how we were going to build those links between parish, church, school and family. And something that just came up in my group conversation, which I'll refer to quickly, but that whole wording and that whole language around, and I think Nichii brought it up. You know, what do we call it, a worshipping community and a school community, or is it the parish, or is it the school? And I once heard a beautiful priest talk about that we are a community of communities. So we have a school community which has a specific focus and a purpose. We have a church community which also has, you know, a specific focus and purpose. But together we are one community, one parish community. So in the work that I led with family educators, we looked at it with that model, that we are a community of communities, that we are a church community, we are a school community, but together we are one parish community. And that was really important, that we had a sort of visual and we were able to do that. So by looking at family evangelisation, we were able to, the family educator role is there to provide lots of different opportunities to link parish and school and families, or church, school and families, to build that one parish. You know, as Nichii also referred to, you know, families being a focus is such a crucial part, because they're connected in so many different ways to the parish, to the church, and so many different ways to the school. You know, you've got young couples coming, getting married, having children, getting their child baptised. You know, often there's that space between baptism and enrolment into the school. So building in something between the church and the school, where it's playgroup or toddlers group, that you're building that connection again, so that they're constantly connected to the parish. But the family educator role, yeah, one strategy that offers lots of different opportunities to engage with families, engaging with their faith, engaging with the parish, being part of the sacraments, youth groups, all those kinds of things, that the family educator works, you know, as a link between the school and the parish, so that families know that this is one parish, that they may be part of the school community, but they're also part of the church community, and together that parish has that mission of you know, evangelising, of welcoming, of teaching our faith, and everything just blends into one parish community. So I guess the key for family educators was looking at those relationships. The family educator related with you know, with the parish priest, worked with the parish priest, with parish staff. So there were lots of links with different parish groups, parish outreach, St Vincent de Paul, any Catholic care work. There was that link that the family educator could then link families that were more active in the school and try and draw them over into the church, so that they could be part of both communities, one parish community. So lots of different opportunities with sacraments, as I said, parish groups, looking at family masses, youth groups, things like that, that really made that connection, and that the role was able to be that bridge between those two different, you know, the church community, the school community, to make one parish community. So yeah, that relationship building was really important, and also communication, always inviting the parish priest over to things that were happening in the school, putting it in the parish bulletin that there were different initiatives, prayer services, different projects, things like that, that parishioners felt welcome to come into the school as well. So building that community of welcome, of identity, being authentically Catholic, offering those things. Yeah, and I think it was, as I said, it was one strategy of linking church and school to make one parish community.
Meredith, and I think that community of communities is a beautiful way to capture where we've been heading today. And I'm going to turn to Grace now, who has been very busy, I know, reading through all the comments on the chat. So Grace, would be love to hear from you now in terms of some of the questions and comments in our last 10 minutes or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you everyone who actually put some comments and questions up to this point. I think that the comments could create another webinar itself, because there is a richness in what you have shared and what you have noticed and what has been noted by all of you. Let me just read a few of those comments. Well, there is no doubt that the show is being stolen by Sophie. Everyone needs Sophie in their school. Everyone needs this Sophie in her parish, so you need Sophie, and you need to identify your Sophie wherever you are. Of course, she is very symbolic, and she's absolutely important for you to embrace the idea about welcoming. Many people were highlighting the needs of welcoming and naming what it actually means. Beautiful comment from Tessie. The new model of evangelization is synodal in nature, which is working together. The communities, especially the intentional faith communities, which is school and parish, they both need to work together. Great comment from Patty. Principals are not taught about parish, and priests are not taught about schools. So this disconnection, how it happens and why, has been noted by you. Parishes and Catholic schools should complement, collaborate, and connect. It is important to have the physical presence of the priest deacon in classrooms. This can be the starting point for synergy between those bodies. And of course, another problem that we see in this lack of connection is that parishioners are mostly not able to articulate the mission of the parish or of the school, and vice versa. School principals report to the parish pastoral council, but engagement is much more than a simple report on school numbers. Great comment. Language is important. God's mission is shared by all Catholics and then parishes, schools, Catholic care, and other agencies. That is noted by Elizabeth. And now to the questions. I think the questions really raise three main topics. First is relationship, and you already gave some of your answers how to enhance this relationship one way or the other. But also a very important question on how, and I would like to now phrase this question to any of the speakers. How to strengthen leadership teams in parishes to perhaps mirror some of the shared leadership in schools so that teams can communicate with each other. So how to strengthen the leadership teams, both in parish and at schools? Maybe let's phrase this question first. I'm not sure, Richard.
Colin,
Yeah, Colin, you're going to
doing
jump
rock,
in.
paper, scissors here. Would you like me to come in? It's
Go
Nichii.
for it, Nichii.
I'd just speak very briefly. I've done some work. I think it's a really good question, and I think leadership is key. I know that Colin raised it as one of the three themes: identity, leadership, and the mission and evangelisation. Around leadership, I think for schools, it's that collaborative model, isn't it? And it's working with leaders. In our context, I speak quite deliberately with leaders, and we work together on school leaders who've got high skill and training in working with young people, engaging with young people and with families, and don't necessarily have such a strong theological background, but how can we work together and use what's in our local parish community? But leaders in schools are required to be confident, visible, religious leaders in the school, the parish and the diocese. And I think that's one way of perhaps it coming together. Proactively seeking, I see a comment there, those families and children who are on the margins, and how we can offer support that extends beyond the school gates. And what is there through the life of the parish and other Catholic ministries and agencies within the parish community in order to support those families and so on. So but the leadership is critical around this, and I don't think we can ever deny the leadership of the school principal and leadership teams, the RE leaders and so on, and the leadership of the local parish priest, who are there for a very good reason, who've got God-given gifts to share. And if we move from a mindset of what do we do individually to what can we do together for the benefit of others, then I think that'd be a really good way of exercising leadership in this space.
And piggybacking off what Nichii says, that some issues to be conscious of is workload. Our priests and leaders often have significant workload. Principals I know of absolutely. So the way in which it's done is quite critical as well. If it's a conversation about that involves more listening than speaking, and that people get to hear each other's issues and then start to actually engage in where there could be shared solutions. It doesn't feel like you're being dumped on. I read an article once that said the difference between a school having to pick up the sacramental program because the parish no longer has the capacity to do it is completely different than a school picking it up because they have wonderful skills that the parish actually acknowledges is going to be the best fit for the young people that are going to be receiving the sacraments.
That's terrific. Grace?
Thank you very much, Richard. Next question, it will be almost like a homework for you and Lisa, because many people were asking what support and resources are available that can make the difference in this enhancing relationship. So I guess I saw in the chat, there were some suggestions what documents to read. So maybe the follow-up of this webinar will be a little bit of a list, maybe shared list of people who participate in this webinar and of your office as to where to go to, how to reference of what we have to do. And I have one more question, which is actually connected with what Colin was saying here. And that comes from Brother Mary Bernard. He says, many times in sacramental programs, once you have completed your last sacrament of initiation, it can feel like graduating from church. Everyone experienced that. In the RCIA, there is a period of mystagogy, follow-up after reception of sacraments to better reflect and interiorize what has been received personally and how to be active in the faith community. And now the question, how can schools and parishes better follow up, better encourage mystagogy post-sacramental program, and therefore promote more synergy between parish and school communities? If you would like to facilitate the answer to this question, Richard, please.
Sure. No, thanks, Grace. And Nichii or Colin, would either of you want to jump in on that one through your own experiences or the research?
Just to get started, it always amazed me. My dad became a Catholic in later years when I was a teenager, and the fact that he had a sponsor all the way through and then his sponsor evaporated the moment that he actually received the sacraments, it's always stunned me that the sponsor doesn't go on for at least as long afterwards as went on beforehand. And I know that often happens with those relationships. Throw the cat amongst the pigeons. I wonder if our whole church needs to go back into the period of mystagogy. I wonder if the parishioners in the seats need to revisit why on earth they are Catholics and what they actually hold on to, because I think often that people that join the church see something that many of us have forgotten or have never known in the first place. So it's not really about education so much as awareness of what it truly means to be Catholic. I was shocked, not shocked, I was surprised when I realised that the new evangelisation has as much to do with current Catholics as it does to do with new Catholics. That in actual fact, the whole church needs to be re-evangelised because good people working really hard, coming along regularly to Sunday Mass, have actually forgotten, arguably, what it is to be Catholic. So if those people that are brand new have the opportunity, if there's situations, probably more over a cup of tea and a meal, rather than going and sitting in front of a PowerPoint, there will be a two-way dynamic that can't help but re-engage everyone into what it means to be followers of Christ in the Catholic Church.
Nichii, just a final thought from you.
Yeah, I agree with those comments. I guess it's interesting, sacramental program is used there, and we often talk, and it's fairly common across parishes to talk about sacraments as being family-oriented, parish-based, school-supported. And I guess just as an added provocation, I guess, we have an understanding of that in relation to the sacramental program, but I'd pose a broader question to myself and others. How can we incorporate family-oriented, and I deliberately position that at the first one, parish-based, school-supported, and or school-based, parish-supported on a whole range of things, and not just about the sacramental programs that are deeply important and faithful, faith-filled and inspiring celebrations. But how can we transfer where that works well more broadly? Maybe it's a bit of our doing of where we come in and where we cut off, not necessarily people coming in and then disengaging. I just pose that.
Terrific. Look, thank you to both of you. We unfortunately are heading to the our finish time. So I want to just bring things to a bit of a close today, but also we have some very important announcements coming up about some upcoming events and also some extra resources that are available. So first of all, just a big thank you to both Nichii and to Colin for sharing their wisdom and the work ahead of time today, and also to Meredith, of course, who also shared in this space. We also are very grateful to a number of other people who we've been connecting with in this space. And one of them is Jeanette Davidson, who I noticed is online today, and who gave us, I think it was four huge tubs worth of family ministry resources. And she is a real pioneer and someone in this area. And of course, if we think about it, sometimes it's a three-legged stool, isn't it, of parish, school and family. And if any of those legs are not being well resourced and engaged, and if they're not all working together, relating together, then the whole thing falls over a little bit. So I think in the coming months might be thinking about how we bring to life more of a family ministry webinar. But I want to move on now to look at some next steps from today. And we can see here that there's, I think the simplest thing is, where do we go to start this conversation? Or if you're already having one, how do we continue it? And I think one of the things I've been hearing so much today is the principal and the parish priest in the same room together? Is the pastoral council and perhaps the leadership team in the school in the same room together, with perhaps some of your leaders in the sacramental space and the RCIA space? I think it's when we're breaking down those silos and coming in and we recognise the opportunities that can flourish. So what are the opportunities for shared conversations? Maybe just using different lens. We sometimes have to put on a different pair of goggles, see things a bit differently. Connect, therefore, with your local parish and school. Just ask the questions. Where are the conversations happening? You can do this also, of course, at a diocesan level. Talk to Catholic education, but also talk with your equivalent in sometimes diocese has some sort of parish support space. Looks very different in each diocese. Are they talking to each other? Even to ask that question, start that conversation happening if it isn't already, and maybe they can develop or steal the principles developed by Port Pirie and other places. And I know there's a great one up at Brisbane we've come across recently too, in this space of parishes and schools working together. And finally, of course, there's resources that we offer here, both the ones that you may have received pre-webinar. If you just came in just before the webinar started to register, you will be getting those. Don't worry about that. And so you've got a chance to look at them again. And then on the next slide, we can see that there's obviously some opportunities to about the webinar. We'll be making a recording of this today, and that will be available to you too, along with the slides. And as I say, if there's some of the comments and FAQs can be bundled together too for you, because it's about our shared wisdom. As always, we ask you to email your feedback if you've got any ideas about how we can enhance the space, or perhaps what we should be talking about. And our next webinar, please lock that in, 22nd of June, the Ministry of Invitation, very connected to this theme. And it's really about that first encounter that we sometimes have with someone, whether it might be a parent in the school, a student, perhaps someone in the neighbourhood. How do we encounter someone? And how are we authentic in that encounter, and then invite them into the space of a conversation about their life and how that might connect with the life of our God? How do we share ourselves? How are we vulnerable in that space? So there's a lot of richness in this area. And so we really encourage you to share this message with others around the ministry of invitation. Very exciting news, though, is our online conference, which is taking place 8th to 10th of July, Alive in the Spirit. And I think we're going to go alive with registrations for that in a week or so. So please keep an eye out for that. It's going to be brimming with keynote speakers, with workshops, over 30 workshops, and a whole other host of ways to interact during that space. So it's a bit like this webinar today, but multiply that over 3 days with a whole range of resources, engagement opportunities, and back-end support for your own community to engage with this, both in the lead up and the follow-up to this conference. Very excited to bring that to you. Finally, a thank you today to behind the scenes, we've got the Pastoral Ministry Network, the Mission Planners Network of Oceania, 2 key networks that do a lot of the planning in this space. And the Diocese of Parramatta offers a lot of kind support, which, as you can see, is here today through both Grace and myself. And the Institute for Mission, where we're hosting this space, is very generous in its support. Behind the camera, you can't see him, is Anthony Costa. Uses a lot of his own equipment and his expertise in this space. And so we're very grateful for all that Anthony does. And Lisa Bright, my colleague in pastoral planning, that does a lot of the work behind the scenes, and Tanya Quinn as well, has been probably muting you today, but she's a lovely person when she's not muting people. She's also very engaging too in this space. So a lot of people to thank, and we thank you particularly for your contribution, your wisdom, your questions, and let's continue to explore this space of being one community in Christ together. Thank you and God bless.